Yeah, so welcome back. So today we are going to do nonlinear inequality constraints, the Karush-Kuhn-Tucker conditions. We'll do the necessary conditions first in this lecture, and then we'll do the sufficiency conditions afterwards. So our problem is, let's first define the NIP problem, the nonlinear inequality constraint programming problem, which is we want to minimize f of x over obviously x, subject to the requirement that there are some nonlinear or linear equality constraints of the form h1 of x is equal to 0, h2 of x equal to 0, and so on up to hm of x is equal to 0. And as is common with us, x comes from Rn, and all these functions are functions from Rn to R. Now the inequality constraints are given by G. The G1 of x is less than or equal to 0, G2 of x is less than or equal to 0, and we have taken here R such constraints, GR of x equal to less than or equal to 0. So we have M equality constraints, usually nonlinear or mixed linear and nonlinear, and then R inequality constraints. Again, some of them could be linear, some of them could be nonlinear. Appropriately, we will discuss, if we are discussing the first order optimality conditions, then we will call it as our functions have to be continuously differentiable functions. If they are however twice continuously differentiable, then we will also have the second order necessary conditions. And as follows our convention, the h vector can be said to be a vector of h1 of x, h2 of x up to hm of x, which will be a m cross 1 vector. And a g vector can be the vector function of g1 of x, g2 of x up to gr of x. Now, these conditions that I am deriving, these are called as Karush-Kuhn-Tucker conditions. They were derived by Kuhn-Tucker in 1951, but I think it was found out that Karush had done it earlier in 1939 or so, or something similar. And so they were called KT conditions, but subsequently, more appropriately, they have been called as KKT conditions. Uh, in this, we first of all, because we have the set of inequality constraints, some of them at any point x star or x bar, some of them will be at 0. Those which are at 0 at the equality are called as the active set of constraints, and those which are strictly less than 0 will be called as inactive. Such constraints would be called as inactive. For example, suppose I have um, a constraint, I have something like this. Say x1 square plus x2 square is less than or equal to 1. Okay. So I have x1 square plus x2 square less than or equal to 1. If I am somewhere here on the circle, here or here, then I will say that this constraint is active. But suppose the point is somewhere inside, then we will say that this constraint is inactive. But now let's say that there is an arc, another arc which is, let's say, going, and let's say that the feasible region is given by this. So then in that case, if my point is here, then this constraint is active, this constraint is inactive. So suppose let's call this constraint as G1, this constraint as G2. So then if I am here, then the active set here will correspond to j equal to 2. So it will be a singleton set 2. Now suppose I am here, then the active set is going to be both 1 and 2. So it depends upon the point at where you are. The active set will keep changing according to the point where you are. Suppose you are somewhere here, then the active set is only going to be index 1, and because the index G2 now has become inactive because it's strictly less than 0. So depending upon your operating point that you are testing, you will have the active set defined as a point. So active set depends upon the point x under consideration, and it's an index set of indexes of all the constraints, inequality constraints which are binding or active at that point. So if J is not in the active set, then we clearly know that it is strictly less than 0, that is the constraint is inactive. So with this basic idea now, if we say, if we are trying to develop the necessary conditions for the optimality, then how do we start? We will always start by saying that let x star be an optimal to the NIP problem, then it must then it must satisfy following set of conditions. Now, before stating those set of conditions, let's first approach this problem through the NEP route, because we have a handle on the NEP problem, so we can approach it through the NEP route. Suppose x star is an optimal to the problem, to the NIP problem, then it must be optimal to this problem. Minimize f of x, the embedded NEP problem, minimize f of x subject to h1x equal to 0, h2x is equal to 0 up to hm of x equal to 0, and all those gj's should be set will be that equal to 0, which come from the active set of constraints. Is it not? Because if it is not optimal to this problem, then basically how can it be optimal to a problem where you are writing gjx is less than or equal to 0? A subproblem of it itself, here itself it is in, here itself it is not optimal. So you can improve right here, um, right here, and anything which is here a small perturbation, because rest of the inactive constraints are strictly less than 0, small perturbations will not make them binding. So that means in a small enough neighborhood you can reduce the objective function, and so therefore you are not at the optimal. So if you are at the optimal, then you must be also at the optimal of the corresponding NEP problem. So with that kind of a thought in mind, now what we are going to do is we are going to define zero Lagrangian multipliers for inequality constraints. Why? Because they are not directly coming into picture. They can become active only when you take a finite step. So if you take a small enough neighborhood, you are not going to hit those constraints, and that's all. A very small enough neighborhood is all you need to check to see whether you are at the local optimum or not. So therefore, those inactive constraints which really don't matter, to them we will assign zero Lagrangian multipliers. Now for equality constraints, I am going to use Lagrangian multiplier set lambda 1 star, lambda 1, lambda 2 up to lambda m, and at the optimal those values will be given by lambda 1 star, lambda 2 star, lambda n star. Now with this, I am going to define a Lagrangian function as follows: f of x plus sigma, this is like looking at lambda 1 h1 plus lambda 2 h2 up to lambda m hm. So this is what is given here, plus for all the active constraints, Lagrangian multipliers mu j are being used. So let's say the first k of them are active, then mu1 g1 plus mu2 g2 up to mu k gk will come. But in general they may be spread out, so that's why I have used the notation that j comes from the set of active constraints, and then each of those active constraints is weighed by mu j, and then you are looking at this summation. Okay, now to apply KKT condition, we will always assume regularity. If the regularity is not satisfied, KKT conditions cannot be applied. It does, then we have to find out some other set of conditions, and there are like Fridtjohn conditions, and there are other constraint qualifications and corresponding optimality conditions. But in this course, we will restrict only to regularity condition. So if regularity condition is not satisfied, then you need to do more work, which I am not covering in this course. But if the regularity conditions are satisfied, then you can immediately use the necessary conditions which we are going to be state soon. So now what do you mean by regularity condition in the case of NIP problem? So when it was a simple first an NEP problem, then we had said that these gradient vectors at x star should be linearly independent. But now only equality constraints are not there. You also have binding or active inequality constraints. So you add those also here. So if the first G1 to say gradient of GK are the active constraints, then we want this set of gradient vectors should be linearly independent. That is what is meant by regularity condition here. Okay. Now, if the point x star is regular, then what we can do? Then we can look at what is the first order optimality condition for the corresponding NEP problem. And what is that? It is that x star lambda star should be a stationary point. X star lambda star should be a stationary point of this Lagrangian function, which is to say that gradient of f of x of star is going to be equal to plus the linear combination of lambda j stars into gradient of the equality constraints times Lagrangian multipliers associated with the active inequality constraints, summation taken over those gradients and the corresponding Lagrangian multipliers. The sum of all of these should be equal to 0. Is it not? That's exactly what we expect from the NEP problem. Now, in addition, and of course I am defining zero Lagrangian multipliers with constraints which are not active. In addition, there is one very important constraint here, that the lambda I star, sorry, the mu j stars, the Lagrangian multipliers corresponding to the active inequality constraint should be greater than or equal to 0. This is in addition a very important constraint that comes out. Suppose there is only inequality constraints are there. This set is empty, let's say. Then what will it mean? It will mean that the positive linear combinations of the gradients of the binding constraints, if this creates a cone like this, and the this is your gradient of f vector, this is your gradient of g vector, then the negative of it minus of gradient of f should come in the cone of this binding inequality constraint. Something like that is what is indicated here. I'll explain it a bit further. However, I'll first like to draw your attention to the fact that when we discussed LIP problem also, we had a very similar kind of requirement, that in the LEP problem, we just said that this should be we just said that this should be summation should be equal to 0, but the moment we had LIP problem, we said that this should happen. In addition, the Lagrangian multipliers corresponding to linear inequality constraints should be greater than or equal to 0. So this is exactly a extension, very similar extension of this, and this can be proved by extending the proof of NEP problem. But today I am not going to do that proof. So here is what a simple illustration. I just want to show you a very simple illustration here, that suppose you had a constraint g of only one constraint, g of x less than or equal to 0, and it indicates a convex set like the one which I have shown here, and the yellow region is the feasible region. Let's say this is something like you are looking at x square by a square plus you are trying to minimize x square by a square plus x y sorry x1 square by a square plus x2 square by b square. So if you look at its uh, its loci, then it will be this kind of ellipsis will be the loci corresponding to constant values of the function. Now x equal to 0, y equal to 0 will not be an optimal to this because the point is origin is here infeasible. So what will you do? You will start uh, increasing the r, and when exactly you touch you touch this g of x is equal to 0, you can stop there, because after that if you increase, you are unnecessarily increasing the objective function value instead of just minimizing it. So when it just touches, then it is clear that the in this gradient vector here will be of the function, you are you are not going to go inside, so the gradient vector is increasing in this, and because it is touching, the gradient vector of the function as well as the constraints are collinear because perpendicular to the to this gradient vector, and yet pointing in the opposite directions. This is where the constraint is going to increase. So you had to increase up to this point because the constraint could not be relaxed in the minimization point. So this has to point in this direction, and because you are not going to go any further inside, in the minimization problem implies that going inside will will tend to increase the function value. So you get that gradient of f of x of star plus a positive constant mu times the gradient of g of x of star equal to 0, and mu in this case will be greater than or equal to 0. So this is exactly the thought process which goes in the uh, Lagrangian in the requirement why these mu's have to be greater than or equal to 0. This illustration is meant to indicate to you why we are having this requirement geometrically, that why mu's should be greater than or equal to 0. I'll explain that geometrically in a couple of examples also as I go down further. First, let us just state the let us just state the necessary conditions, KKT necessary conditions. Let x star be a local minimum to the problem NIP. All functions are from my C square, twice continuously differentiable. Write first of all the Lagrangian function as follows. Now remember, your g's of x is of the form less than or equal to 0. So suppose somebody has given you a constraint x1 square plus x2 square, say greater than or equal to 1. Then you should write it as x1 square minus x2 square less than or equal to minus 1, and then include it as mu1 times minus x1 square minus x2 square plus of 1. If you don't do this, then this requirement of mu greater than or equal to 0 will not be properly addressed. So this point is very important. When you were only looking at NEP problem, it didn't really matter whether you brought it like this, or you brought it like this in the Lagrangian function, because no requirement on sign of lambda was placed. H of x equal to 0 and minus h of x equal to 0 is essentially saying the same thing. So it didn't matter whether you wrote the Lagrangian function like this or you wrote the Lagrangian function like this. But now, because we are writing it with this kind of a thing, if any constraint is of the form greater than or equal to 0, then inequality constraint, then it should come with a minus sign in the Lagrangian function. Only if it is of the form less than or equal to 0, it will come with the plus sign. Please make a note of this. Now assume that x star is a regular point. Then x star it's necessary that X star satisfies following conditions. What are they? X star, lambda star, mu star are the stationary point with respect to the x grade variables of the Lagrangian functions. Second, all Lagrangian multipliers associated with the inequality constraints are to be greater than or equal to 0. Third, the Lagrangian multipliers associated with inactive constraints at x star should be strictly 0. Together, these two conditions are also called as complementary slackness conditions. Complementary slackness conditions. Why? Because suppose the constraint is inactive, so there is a slack in this constraint plus some positive number has to be added before it becomes 0. Now, if this constraint is, there is a slack Si Sj which is associated here which is non-zero, then the corresponding Lagrangian multiplier mu j has to be 0. So if this is slack, this cannot be, this is binding, that is mu j greater than or equal, in this mu j greater than or equal to 0, this has become binding. On the other hand, if this constraint is 0 is equal to 0, that is binding, then the mu j can be greater than 0 also. It could be 0 or it could be greater than 0. So therefore, in all cases, Gj mu j becomes equal to 0 and one of the two have to be always uh, uh, always the slack. So Gj mu j, this product Gj mu j is always 0. If this is slack, strictly less than 0, then this cannot be slack. If this is strictly greater than 0, it is strictly greater than 0, then that means the constraint is binding. So there is no slack. There is a slack with mu. There is a slack, and I'll write it like I'll write it that if there is a slackness, there is a slack with the constraint Gj, which is to say that Gj is strictly less than 0, you have to add something to make it 0, then there is no slackness with mu j. Mu j is exactly equal to 0. If there is slackness with mu j, that is to say that mu j is strictly greater than 0, which means that the constraint is binding at the optimal, then it automatically means that this is going to be equal to 0. So either way, the product of Gj Xj is going to be equal to 0, but this is what is meant by complementary slackness. In addition, it is permitted that there is no slack with both. This is also possible that Gj of X star is also binding and corresponding mu j is also set to 0. This is possible. This is possible. What it means is that constraint is not uh, that constraint is weakly binding. That constraint is weakly binding. That is the sensitivity that you recall that we had a sensitivity theorem earlier in the previous lecture. The sensitivity term here would turn out to be 0. Well, if time permits, we will take some example on this later on. Now let's take one example. Okay, simple example. Let's take. I want to minimize uh, x1 square plus x2 square plus x3 square subject to the constraint x1 plus x2 plus x3 less than or equal to minus 3. First of all, I will check what is the unconstrained minimum of this problem. The unconstrained minimum of this problem is 0, 0, 0, but 0 plus 0 is greater than minus 3. So therefore, unconstrained minimum is infeasible. Once you know that this unconstrained minimum is infeasible, immediately you come to the conclusion that this constraint should be active. So once this constraint is going to be active, now I am going to write the Lagrangian function x1, x2, x3 and mu. I'm going to use only one mu because there is only one inequality constraint here, plus mu times of x1 plus x2 plus x3 plus 3 plus 3 less than or equal to 0. So that's why this is the Lagrangian function. Now, what are the optimality requirements? Gradient of the Lagrangian function with respect to x1, x2, x3 should be 0. So I will get, it's not mu1 star, it's just mu star, plus x2 plus mu star equal to 0, x3 plus mu star is equal to 0. So x1 star plus, so I'll get x1 star equal to x2 star equal to x3 star is equal to minus q mu star. So if you look at this requirement that this constraint is active now, then what do we have? X1 star plus x2 star plus x3 star is equal to minus 3. So we get x1 star equal to x2 star equal to x3 star is equal to minus 1, and therefore mu star becomes equal to 1. So my Lagrangian multiplier with respect to the binding inequality constraint is positive. I have got a stationary point of the Lagrangian function and it is feasible. So I have satisfied the first order necessary conditions. Now for the second order conditions. So for the second order conditions, my in this case is going to be just 1 1 1, a positive definite matrix, because the constraint is a linear constraint, so its second order derivative terms will give me 0. And so I have to look at all the set of vectors y such that 1 1 1, which is the gradient of the binding inequality constraints, times y1 y2 y3 should be equal to 0, and this y vector should be not 0. But because this matrix is positive definite, y transpose this y will always be greater than 0 for all y is not equal to 0. And so we can immediately come to the conclusion that the second order necessary conditions are also satisfied, and so this problem meets the necessary requirements, KKT necessary conditions for optimality. Remember, since there is only one constraint and its gradient is 1 1 1, by naturally by default the regularity condition is satisfied. In fact, this is indeed the global optimum also for this problem, that will come out of sufficiency condition, that will come out of also the fact that this is a convex programming problem, that can also be brought from the fact that this function is a Coursive function. Many possible ways are there. Is a very simple problem. Incidentally, why was this taken? Authors have taken this, Bhatsikas has taken this to be less than or equal to minus 3 and not plus 3. Because if you take plus 3 here, then 0 0 0, the unconstrained optimal is a feasible point, will become a feasible point with this constraint inactive, and so the Lagrangian multiplier of this constraint will be set to 0, and 0 0 0 will turn out to be optimal. So even in that case the KKT conditions are satisfied, but the problem no more remains interesting to illustrate as an example. Now let me take one more nice and simple problem. My problem is, this is a linear programming problem. This one I have taken from Bazara, Sherali and Shetty. So the problem is minimize minus of x1, which is equivalent to saying that I want to maximize x1 subject to the fact that x1 plus x2 is less than or equal to 1. So this is this is the line x1 plus x2 equal to 1. This is x1 plus x2 less than or equal to 1, and minus of x2 less than or equal to 0, or in other words x2 greater than or equal to 0. So this yellow shaded region here represents the feasible region, and I want to increase x1. So I can increase, if I increase from here, I can only go up to this point. If I am here, I cannot increase it any further. If I start here, I can increase it up to this point here, which is larger than this point here. So it's very clear that if I want to push the x1 to the maximum value, this vertex is where the solution should be. And usually the linear programming problems, if they have a solution, they always have one at the vertex. We could not prove that, but this is illustrated in this particular case here, and so we get this as the possible solution. So if this is the possible solution, then that means we are looking at 1 0 x star to be candidate, that x star candidate that we are looking to be is 1 0. And so the active set of constraints at x star is both the inequality constraints are here active, 1 and 2 both are active, so that this becomes the active set here. And the gradient of f of x of star is going to be minus 1 0, and the gradient of g1 of x of star is going to be equal to 1 1, and the gradient of g2 of x of star is going to be equal to 0 and minus 1. Now since 1 1 and 0 of minus 1, these two vectors here are linearly independent, so regularity condition is satisfied, and so we should have that minus of 1 of 0 plus mu1 star of 1 of 1 plus mu2 star of 0 of minus 1 to be equal to 0 0. So if I take this thing on the right hand side here, I will get the first equation as mu1 star plus 0 times of mu2 star should be equal to 1, and the second equation is mu1 star minus mu2 star should be equal to 0, which is to say that mu2 star also should be equal to 1. So what is it that I have got? My this problem, my uh, corresponding to the active by binding or active inequality constraints, the Lagrangian multipliers are strictly greater than 0 in this case, and so the first order necessary conditions are satisfied. There is no second order necessary condition to check here because all the functions are linear. However, we know that a linear programming problem is a convex programming problem, and so the stationary point actually will indicate an optimal point. An important point that I want to bring out of here is that because our requirement is, in this case we are writing that minus of f of x of star sorry plus gradient of this plus mu1 star, and mu1 is positive, mu1 has to be greater than or equal to 0 of gradient of x of star plus mu2 star gradient of g2 of x of star should be equal to 0, implies that mu1 star gradient of g1 x1 star plus mu2 star gradient of g2 x2 of star should be equal to minus of gradient of f of x of star. So now here this is the gradient of f of x of star is minus 1 0. So therefore it is this vector. Gradient of the g1 of x less than or equal to 0, this is 1 comma 1. So here a line at 45 degrees, and the gradient of the g2 of x of star is 0 minus 1. So therefore it's a line at this particular point. So what we are saying here is that, see, if this is one vector, this is another vector, and mu1s are greater than or equal to 0, mu2s are greater than or equal to 0. So what you generate by this kind of a combination, positive combinations or non-negative combinations of these vectors, you generate a cone of this side. This cone is what you generate from here. And our requirement is that minus of gradient of f of x of star should lie in the cone generated by these two vectors, which is exactly the geometry of this particular geometrical interpretation of this particular problem. I'll illustrate this point again by another example from Bazara. Another example from Bazara, I'll illustrate this point. My problem is minimize x1 minus 3 whole square plus x2 minus 2 whole square, subject to the requirements that g1 of x is x1 square plus x2 square is less than or equal to 5. G2 constraint is given by x1 plus 2x2 is less than or equal to 4. G3 is x1 greater than or equal to 0, or in our standard notation written as minus x1 less than or equal to 0, and G4 is x2 greater than or equal to 0, which is written in our standard notation as minus x2 less than or equal to 0. So first of all, let us sketch the feasible region. So this is this and this side represents the feasible region of this. This arc of the circle here, this circle you have to complete here. This inside of this is the constraint which is given by by the g1 of x less than or equal to 0. So here it touches the x-axis at under root of 5 comma 0. Then x1 greater than or equal to 0 means all this side of the x2 axis, and x2 greater than or equal to 0 means all the upper side of this x1 equal to 0 line. So all of them, when you put it together, the region shaded in this yellow part, this represents the feasible region. Now where is the unconstrained minimum of this problem? X1 equal to 3, x2 equal to 2. It's here. X1 equal to 3, x2 equal to 2 is here. So the unconstrained is minimum is outside of the feasible region. So what you have to do is you look at the contours corresponding to increasing radiuses, and when that radius touches this the radius touches this feasible region, that is where your optimal will come. Now, in this particular case, I want to check straight away, because I don't want to do the math all the math here. So I want to check if 2 1 is an optimal point. Okay. So first of all, to check whether 2 1 is an optimal point. So first constraint, let's say g1 of 2 comma 1 is going to be equal to 4 plus 1, which is equal to 5. So g1 of x of star becomes 0. It becomes binding. Then g2 of 2 of 1 is going to be 1 plus 2 times of 2, which is going to be equal, sorry, I'm sorry, 2 comma 1, right? So 2 plus 2 times of 1, which is equal to 4, which means that g2 of x star also becomes binding. And since 2 minus of 2 is strictly less than 0, so g3 is inactive, and similarly g4 is inactive. So the active set of constraints here at 2 comma 1 is going to be given by 1 and 2. Okay, So our Lagrangian function, so straight away we will say that mu3 star should be equal to 0 and mu4 star should be equal to 0. And mu1 star has to be, we have to check if we get mu1 star. If we get a stationary point, then we will, of the Lagrangian function, then we will have to check if they are greater than or equal to 0. If they become greater than or equal to 0, then of course, so let me write, okay, let me just for the time being write this as the Lagrangian function. And now let us look at the gradient vector of f. So what is the gradient vector of f? I'll just cut it, copy it here once and keep it here because easy to keep a track of them. So gradient of f is going to be 2 times x1 minus 3 x2 star minus 3, and what is the point I am checking? 2 comma 1. So the point x star which is being checked is 2 comma 1. So if I substitute 2 comma 1, then this is minus of 2, and I'm sorry, this is going to be 2. So if I substitute 1 here, then 1 minus 2 is minus 1, so minus 2 of 2 and minus of 2. So this is what turns out to be gradient of f of x of star. Now gradient of g1 of x of star is going to be, the first constraint is this, its gradient is going to be 2x1 star 2x2 star. So therefore 4 and 2. When I substitute this here, I will get 4 and 2. And the gradient of g the gradient of g2 of x of star is going to be equal to 1, because it's a linear constraint, it doesn't depend upon x1 star x2 star, simply 1 comma 2. So what we need to now check is whether minus 2 of 2, for checking the stationary point, whether the given point is stationary or not, we need to evaluate this, see if this is satisfied first, that is checking the stationarity, and then so I'll write 4 mu1 star plus mu2 star to be equal to 2, and the second equation can be written as mu1 star plus of mu2 star to be equal to 1. Is it not? This is minus of 2. So the 2 is a common factor in the second equation. So I can write mu1 star plus mu2 star, taken this on the right hand side, to be equal to 1. So then I will just subtract the second equation from the third equation, second equation. I'll subtract the second equation from the first equation, and I'll get mu1 star to be equal to 1 by 3 and mu2 star to be therefore equal to 2 by 3. So what do I get? Indeed, I get that the Lagrangian multipliers are of the active constraints are positive. There is a stationary point. 2 comma 1 is a stationary point of the Lagrangian function. It is a feasible point, and the corresponding Lagrangian multipliers are all greater than or equal to 0. And for the constraints which are non-binding, they are 0, and for the constraints which are binding, in this particular case, they are positive. So the first order conditions are satisfied. Second order conditions are going to be trivially satisfied. Why? Because the okay, let's write the Lagrangian. Let's write the del square xx of L. So you take, this is going to be 2 times of first let me just take the derivative with respect to x1 square. So this term will give me first 2 times of, first time I take a derivative I will get 2 times of x1 minus 3, and then second time I will take this derivative I will get 2, and similarly I will get a similarly I will get a derivative of 2 again. So I'll get 2 comma 2 plus, if you take this, it is going to be mu1 star of 2 comma again 2, mu1 star of 2 comma 2, but mu1 star is, how much is my mu1 star? Mu1 star is 1 by 3. So therefore this is going to be very nice, a very nice positive term and continues to be diagonal, and this will not contribute anything in the Hessian of the Lagrangian function because it's a linear constraint. So therefore what are we are going to get here is basically uh, uh, basically a positive diagonal positive definite matrix is what we will get. And because we are getting a positive definite diagonal matrix, let me not spoil my sheet here. So because we are getting a positive definite Hessian of the Lagrangian function, any appropriate projected Hessian is going to be uh, also going to be positive definite. So the second order necessary requirements are trivially satisfied, and indeed geometry of this shows that this point is, geometry shows that this point is the optimal point, and algebraically we have seen that necessary conditions are satisfied. Oh, by the way, I just forgot to check the this, I should have not made this mistake. I should check the regularity regularity requirements. So for the first constraint, when I look at the gradient of G1 evaluated at 2 1, so it is going to be 4 and 2. This is the first vector, and the second gradient vector is 1 and 2, and clearly these two vectors are linearly independent. The other one is not a scalar multiple of the first one, and so that settles the fact that it is regular. But you should actually check the regularity condition beforehand. Don't make that mistake. I erred here. I'm sorry about that. With this, we will close this lecture. In the next lecture, we will do uh, the sufficiency conditions for the NIP conditions. Thank you.